Well, good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where true health is, well, what's tonight? Tonight is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. Remember, this program is for informational purposes only, where our doctors share the health and wealth with you. What is wealth? Wealth is health. And what is health? Being healthy is being wealthy. As always, we're going to go around this great panel once again and introduce everyone to you that's here. As we go around the table, I want to introduce my coworker. I'll start with my coworker coach, my very own coworker, Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham, if you would introduce yourself to everyone here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a retired physician. I retired and went to Washington, D.C. to work for the representative in his office as a congressional fellow. And I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And Doug is in the sun. While we were in the rain the other week, Doug was in the sun, but he was sending his sun ray vibes over to us. I can see Dr. James Miller, who's here, the man who says I threaten him to be on every Monday night, but we look forward to him being here. Dr. James Miller.
Good evening, everybody. We're so happy to be here again, and we're glad to have you along with us, and hopefully that we can give you some information that will make you healthy and make your life a lot richer.
Wonderful, wonderful. To the family medicine doctor who also is in infectious disease, but she dresses up in slaves when she gives the vaccine. That's our very own Dr. Maya Green.
Hello, Nikki, thank you for having me. Congressman Davis, thank you for having me, and all these wonderful colleagues who I've learned so much from, and here to learn and discuss and learn from colleagues and learn from our community. I love this time of sharing, and thank you for having me back.
Wonderful, wonderful. To the man who's a doctor extraordinaire, a family medicine and infectious disease specialist just as well, but he's also that dad extraordinaire, and he thinks he's somewhat of a chef, but I don't know. I think they kind of keep him around because maybe he has the dog trained, and that's Dr. Steve Thomas. Dr. Thomas.
Hey guys, happy to be here, and like Dr. Maya said, I'm happy to learn from my colleagues, and thankful to Congressman Davis for having this forum to have us to share with the community.
Great. Want to say hey to Martha, who has checked in, and to Linda Johnson. And she says, good evening to everyone. Want to remind everyone to remember to share, and start your watch parties. Share because health is wealth. To the man who is a family medicine practice doctor and a weight loss guru, but one who really has the passion to be on Iron Chef. That's our very own Dr. Tony Hampton.
Yeah, absolutely happy to be here. I just want to be here to learn and to share knowledge. And I think anyone who is on this journey through life will realize that a life of continuous learning is a good life. So I just thank you guys for being here, and I appreciate you allowing me to share my thoughts.
Great. Thank you so much. We have two special guests here with us on tonight who are great friends of the office and who are trailblazers in what they do. So first of all, I'm going to introduce one, and then she will share the next person with us and introduce her just as well. So to our very good friend and friend of the office, Maritza, who's the Chief Government Affairs and Policy Officer for Prevent Child Abuse America and Healthy Families of America. She is here with us on tonight because April is also Child Abuse Prevention Month. But the greatest thing about Maritza today is that she is 8 months into her pregnancy and has less than 30 days to go before she has a great new bundle of joy here. Maritza, go right ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Congressman Danny Davis is such a champion for our work at Prevent Child Abuse America. And as Nikki said, April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and we are really just here to raise awareness and inspire collective action so that our country's children can lead the best, healthiest lives. Nikki, did you want me to go into a little bit about what we do, or pass it over to Becky and do a roundtable discussion?
So introduce Becky really quickly, and then the congressman will do his opening welcomes, and he'll start off that conversation with you guys.
Wonderful. Well, so pleased to have Becky Weber with us today. She is the board president of Prevent Child Abuse Illinois.
And thank you for having me tonight. This is an honor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Becky, for being here with us on today. And for those of you who know, the vanguard on healthcare, one who is the vanguard on child welfare just as well, the Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, our very own Congressman Danny K. Davis.
Well, thank you very much, Nikki, and let me thank all of the group for being with us this evening. Let me just say that we've been having a good time. You know, we were at Dr. Miller's brother's church a few Sundays ago, and then on Saturday we was at his other brother's church. We had a great press conference at Reverend Johnny Miller's church on Saturday with the mayor of the city of Chicago, the new CEO of Walgreens Global, a partnership that we're very pleased to have and to interact with, especially as we continue to figure out ways to make sure that everybody gets protected from the coronavirus. But also, one of my staff persons raised a very interesting question at our staff meeting today in terms of individuals who are homebound and can't get out to get the vaccination. And so we had a rather healthy discussion about how do we make sure that those individuals get the protection. They can't really come out. They are pretty much confined to home. And I think that's one of the things we're going to find out some addressment to. Let me just say that one of my favorite songwriters said that our children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. Let the children's laughter remind us of the way that we used to be. And so children are the future of our world. I think the two worst things that you can possibly do for children is one, to abuse them. The other is to neglect them. As far as I'm concerned, the two sort of go hand in hand. Neglect and abuse. I am so pleased that Becky is with us. And a lot of people really don't know that a big piece of my assigned work relates very directly to children. Very directly. Homeless children. Children without parents. Children who need all of the assistance that society can provide. It's my firm belief that you can determine the greatness of a society by how well it treats its young, how well it treats its old, and how well it looks after those who have difficulty caring for themselves. So a focus on children is worth more than its weight in gold. So I'm eager to get on with it and get into this discussion. And I thank all of our guests and all of you for being with us this evening. And I look forward to it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Simply outstanding. Actually, we've been joined by the urologist of the stars, our very own Dr. Terry Mason.
Yes, you have, Nikki.
All right, yeah. That is simply wonderful.
Thank you. Thank
you.
And
Melissa, take it away. Tell us about child abuse prevention.
Sure. And I mean, the congressman always inspires me, such a poet, but inspired me of the words of Frederick Douglass, who said it's easier to build strong children than it is to heal broken men. And, unfortunately in society, sometimes we forget that children grow up in families. We can't just treat the children. We have to also work to support and wrap around families, because children aren't growing up in silos. So it's this kind of 2-generational approach. You can't raise healthy children if you're not healthy yourself, and have the necessary supports, the basic needs, food, shelter, access to health care. And so really that's what we're trying to talk about. We feel like there needs to be a paradigm shift right now in how we work to support children and families. And so just, yes, to give a little background about Prevent Child Abuse America, we are the oldest and largest organization dedicated to child abuse and neglect, but really working on the front end before families are in crisis. And we also have 50 state chapters, including Becky, who is here today representing Prevent Child Abuse Illinois. We're headquartered in Chicago, and also have a evidence-based home visiting program, Healthy Families America, that is delivering services to approximately 1 million home visits every year through 600 evidence-based home visiting sites. And we have 41 HFA sites in Illinois and 13 in Chicago. And really, we're partnering with families. This is voluntary, it's strength-based, where we work with moms prenatally and then through the first years of birth to support them. And we've seen just really impressive outcomes in terms of child development, educational attainment, reductions in premature mortality, mental health, substance misuse, and really the prevalence of child abuse and neglect. And so that's why we're so thankful to the dedication of Congressman Davis, who has been a historic champion for evidence-based home visiting and really understanding the impact and health outcomes it can have on children and families. He sponsored HR 4768, which was the Home Visiting to Reduce Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Act. And it would double funding for home visiting to serve pregnant women, new mothers, and their children, really aiming to lower maternal mortality. And as I said, there's some really impressive outcomes coming from HHS. 81% of the programs have showed improvement in maternal and child health. HFA programs, for example, have seen a 50% reduction in low birth weight babies. This is one of the biggest drivers in Medicaid. And we also know that maternal and infant mortality disproportionately affects African American women, including that preterm birth rate, which is an alarming 50% higher for Black women. And what really home visiting does, we have, highly trained individuals who are from the communities that they're working in. So they're a trusted relationship. They can be nurses and educators, and they really create connections between mothers and community health practitioners to address some of those social determinants of health that affect well-being. And this can include parental stress, social support, access to healthcare, income and poverty status, housing, transportation. Some of the impressive outcomes is just even working with moms to get them enrolled in their GED or, in jobs training. Because again, you have to support the family as a whole. We know that, poverty is a big indicator sometimes in child abuse and neglect. And we really have to look at the context in the communities and of where children are growing up and how do we connect them to access to support services? Because when we have healthy kids, we can have a healthy community, healthy workforce. And the only thing I wanted to say before passing it over to Becky and the doctors here today is that there's just this huge, large, and growing body of research about adverse childhood experiences and how that can harm just the most basic levels of your nervous and immune system. The original ACE study, which was conducted over 20 years ago by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente, is one of the largest investigations of child abuse and its association with health and adult well-being. And I mean, it's just staggering. I think people don't believe me when I say some of these stats, but preventing ACEs can reduce many health conditions, including 21 million cases of depression, 1.9 million cases of heart disease, and 2.5 million cases of obesity. And those who have experienced one or who have experienced 6 or more ACEs on average die 20 years earlier than those that don't. So again, it's something we got to pay attention to. And it's something that we know is playing out in numerous ways every day in the lives of children and families. But we also know children of different races do not experience ACEs equally. Nationally, 61% of Black children and 51% of Hispanic children experienced at least one ACE compared to 40% of white children. But the good news is, because I want to leave you with hope that ACEs is preventable. And with that, I'll pass it over to Becky Weber to talk a little bit about their work before passing it over to the great doctors here today.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for having me on this evening. Prevent Child Abuse Illinois is celebrating 30 years of service to help prevent child abuse and neglect for our children in Illinois. And before I get into the prevention trainings and workshops that we currently have, I'm glad Marissa brought up the ACEs, because PCA Illinois has been awarded a grant, and we are going to start developing a program specifically for ACEs for our children here in Illinois. Currently, we have the following prevention trainings and workshops that we do around the state to help educate people on how to help and to prevent child abuse. Stewards of children, the effects of domestic violence on children, the happiest baby on the block, child sexual abuse prevention, childhood trauma, shaken baby syndrome, child abuse prevention 101, and the effects of methamphetamine on children. Those are our top 8 programs that we do trainings. The whole goal of Prevent Child Abuse Illinois is to bring awareness and to educate teachers, anybody around the state on, recognizing the signs of child abuse, and to educate them on how to help these children and to how to help the parents. Every year, Prevent Child Abuse Illinois has a conference, and we really focus in on the home visiting program. We have a special dinner and awards ceremony. And I did not know much about home visiting before I got on the board of directors of Prevent Child Abuse Illinois, but I am going to tell you, after setting through 7 years of listening to stories of the people that have been helped by the home visiting program, I told Marissa in an email today that this is probably the most important work that we can do to help our families and our children. And I'm very proud that Prevent Child Abuse Illinois is involved in this, and it is something that we really need to make sure continues. And I think I think that pretty well sums it up. Marissa did a wonderful job. And once again, thank you so much for inviting me to participate this evening.
Wonderful. Oh, go right ahead, Congressman.
No, I was just going to say thanks to her, but I was also going to say for Dr. Pete's benefit, when we passed the Affordable Care Act several years ago, we put $6 billion in there for home visiting and over a 10-year period of time. And the primary person who stimulated the movement on that came from the Near North Health Center, where we had as a witness one of the staff persons from Near North. And so I always say that Near North has had a great deal to do with getting home visiting put into the Affordable Care Act. I can't think of her name at the moment, but I guarantee you, you know who I'm talking about.
Is it Iris, Congressman? Is her name
No,
Iris?
that was
Okay.
Mrs. She's now doing. She and her husband do all kind of things. She retired.
Yeah, Pete's thinking real hard.
Yeah,
We want to
I'll
say
think of it.
You know what? Makeda London.
You're absolutely right.
London.
Makeda London.
London,
Nope.
yes.
Mrs. London was our star witness at one of the hearings in Ways and Means, and she talked about the importance of home visiting, which I became aware of many, many years ago, actually way back when we started the federally qualified health centers, and we'd go out and recruit people in the neighborhood to come and work and to take their knowledge back to their neighbors and friends and teach them. So one question I would ask, do we find that there's any differentials in child abuse or child neglect in age categories? I'm saying, do we find that younger parents maybe have a tendency to do any more than older parents, or if teen parents have a tendency to do any more than parents who may be a little older? Is there any data on that?
Yes, there's data that, children who die from child abuse and neglect are overwhelmingly young. I believe about 75% of them are under the age of 1. And that's, we know there's a correlation just between the stress. A first-time mom, sometimes doesn't understand, oh, my child's crying, I don't know, what's happening, or safe sleep practices, things that are, or a caregiver. Sometimes moms have to go to work, or dads, and leave them with someone who isn't their primary caregiver, and we see neglect. But yes, there is stat that really children who die from child abuse and neglect are overwhelmingly young, approximately 1/2 or less than a year old, and 75% are under 3 years of age. So we always talk about anything we can do to support those families, those new families, and prenatally, before you have the baby crying in front of you, really to help set plans in place.
All right. Well, that's my question. Thank you very much.
Nikki, I was triggered by Linda Johnson's question. She's a regular, and I want to thank her for her question. But I want Marissa and Becky to answer it, but I want to comment on it before they answer it. The question is, do you target the child that struggles from crack or blow? And my comment is the following. I don't listen to rap like I used to, because too busy listening to lectures and things like that are dealing with nutrition. But because of the great artist DMX passing on last Friday, I was, interested in looking at his music. And then as I listened to his music, I realized he was also interviewed. And when he was interviewed, he said at 14, his mentor exposed him to tainted marijuana that had crack in it. So it speaks to that question that Ms. Johnson has. So he was exposed, but I think about what that did to him. In my mind, a 14-year-old, I got a 21 and a 23-year-old, and they just children still to me because they're precious to me, right? And so at 14, a child is exposed to crack cocaine. And he certainly went on to do great things. In fact, one song that I hadn't heard was I Miss You, a collaboration he did with Faith Evans, and beautiful song talking about his grandmother. But it's almost like he was crying out for help, right? And we didn't provide the help he needed. So I guess I just wanted to honor him by mentioning his name, but just as importantly, I would like for our guests to answer the question as it relates to exposing our children, whether they're 14 or younger, to things like crack, and do you guys target certain drugs or certain exposures?
Yeah, and I'll just start with like all families need support and help. I also think a lot of times we see risk factors of families who themselves grew up, exposed to child abuse and neglect, so they're self-medicating. And so I would say what we want to do, again, is be universal programming. We don't want people to say like, oh, I don't want to ask for help. Like, when home visitors go into the home, they're a trusted resource. They come in there, and sometimes it takes 6 months, a year for families to really open up and say, I'm struggling with substance use. But we also find that then they want to be connected to services and can do it in a way that's non-judgmental and adversarial. If you go in and say, hey, you're doing this and that's bad, parents don't want to be bad parents, and they want to, all the parents we work with, I would say, want to be good parents, but they don't have the coping mechanisms. They don't know how, they only know that their parents hit them. And so like, that's how they're dealing with stress. I have 2 kids, 3 on the way, and I'll tell you my stress levels get up to here, but if I didn't do this work, I don't know how I would have other strategies and mechanisms to cope. So while that's a risk factor, I think what we need to do is integrate in the community, like in a family resource center or in a community health center, where families in a non-stigmatizing way can say, I'm struggling with this and I need help, and get help. And I think we've also learned, and Congressman Danny Davis is also a chief sponsor of the Family First Prevention Services Act, that even when families are struggling with adverse things, it's actually the research over the years has taught us keeping families together is healthier than what it does to the children. So I just think we need more access to services in a non-stigmatizing way. And so, yes, substance use is could be a risk factor, but we also then need to look at the system, of how we're supporting families.
Well, Prevent Child Abuse Illinois has one of their trainings. It's called The Effects of Methamphetamine on Children. However, it deals with drugs. And that's one of the trainings that they try to do to start the prevention. And once again, like we're talking about, that's where the home visiting program is so important. I myself am a CASA volunteer, and the just like CASA volunteers, the home visitors create trust with their families that they have, and as long as they've got that trust and that bond, then they can help them. So that's also a big part of it, is getting people in the door to help them, because a lot of them don't know where to turn.
Yeah. I would just like to say, along the same lines that Dr. Hampton mentioned about DMX passing, I just want to say that I've known Tony for quite a while, Dr. Tony, and I know he had a huge DMX poster in his college dorm room. So this whole business about him not listening to rap music, okay, but that's neither here nor there. Let me say this. First of all, I saw an interview with DMX, and Dr. Phil was interviewing him, and I guess he was fixing his life or whatever. And he was talking to his son, and he had this. It was the most honest, like, interaction I've seen in a long time, where he was telling his son, he said, I don't ever remember any of my friends having a father around. Any, he said, any. And he was in tears. Now, here this guy is a multimillionaire. He was in tears, like a sobbing kid, and saying, I didn't know what to do. And I thought, I'm like, wow, it was a great sort of, he was like, I'm a millionaire, but I still didn't know what to do. I had lots of money and I still didn't know what to do. And so, and I think about the times that earlier in my career when we were working with Project Brotherhood, and we had a fatherhood development class, and many of our funders would ask us, well, why do you need that? Like that, why do you need that? And I'm like, well, to build strong men, it's this false sense of like that, oh, well, fathers don't need to have a relationship with their children in order to be whole men. It's like, that's not true. Like, these men they were broken because of the lack of relationship with their kids. And so the whole part of the fatherhood development class was, yes, we included HIV prevention, things like that our funder wanted us to put into this class, but we needed to build whole men. And part of that was giving them the skill sets, the negotiating skills, even to see their children, maybe not having a lot of money that the moms may have thought that the new dads needed in order to see the child. But I'm just thinking, just thinking what sort of programs is specifically for men to help them to, one, feel empowered to be in the lives of their children. Do you know of any, and what can you share with our audience?
Becky, you want to take it, or I can take it?
Well, as far as that issue, it's not through Prevent Child Abuse Illinois, but there is a program called Coaching Boys into Men. And it is a wonderful program to use in the schools. And I don't know, maybe that's something that Prevent Child Abuse America, Prevent Child Abuse Illinois maybe needs to look at. But I belong to the General Federation of Women's Clubs, and we have been involved with them. And that is something that is done in the schools, and it gives the young men role models. You know, they use either coaches or teachers. And I'm telling you, all young men would benefit from that program, because that is, once again, like I said, I'm a CASA volunteer, and I've been a CASA volunteer for 11 years. And I have seen firsthand how the lack of male role models in these boys' lives affect them. So if we could maybe start now trying to break that cycle and getting these young men to these, junior high kids and high school boys to realize that is an important thing for them to do, whether they've had that or not, they need to do that. So I really think that is a wonderful program.
And I would, go, please, Dr. Maya.
Go ahead, Marissa.
Well, I was just going to say we work with 50 state chapters, and I would say about 30 of them are implementing fatherhood initiative programs. But I'll say there needs to be more research into this area so we're, implementing research and evidence informed, but also through home visiting is the field really has done a pivot to be like, we need the dads, because when the dads are there and at the table and supporting, and you see them peeking in sometimes, like, what are you guys talking about? And what do you mean about? childhood development. So when we're empowering the dads to see this is just as much your role as it is anyone else's, we find like the retention rate, to be really stellar. And so there are programs, but there needs to be more people talking about this. And the CDC says if you have one stable, caring relationship in your life, is that an educator, is that your, a father, we see some really great outcomes. So the field is getting there, but I think we need a little more investment into like the research of some of these programs and more wide scale implementation. But I'll say I'm really proud of our chapters because they are doing this, and there's a big talk about it the last few years of how important it is. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I was going to say, to dovetail, so as humans, we go through different stages of development. In short, one of the stages is where we look around and we start to identify traits and identities that kind of we associate with. And having kind of stable adult figures in a person's life gives them options of what pieces to take to identify with. This speaks to why it's important to have parental figures. Their fathers are so important because you want to take that and give that person the option to identify, like, this is okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be this, this is who I am. Now later on, we all go through this stage where we're like, okay, all that stuff I identified as, I'm going to carve my own niche, and this is how I'm going to kind of put my spin on who I am. But that foundation for a lot of people is there, right? You go through a stage where you want to identify, I'm this, I'm that, I'm not this, I'm not that, therefore I like these things and I do these things. And then you put your own spin on how you want to present to the world. But that foundation is laid. Not only that, in adolescence, now we all remember when we were adolescent and we were just like, I'm just going to do what I want to do. The things we think about that we did when we were teenagers, we were like, what was I thinking? And then when we look at adolescents, it's like, this person thinks they're invincible. Why? So you think nothing's going to happen to you? We say that, right? The answer for a lot of them is yes. You know what I'm saying? When you're saying that, they looking at you like, yeah, and why? Because this part of the brain holds our risk reward. I'm trying to get myself in there. Risk reward. It's a balance, like a scale. Like, I want to do this, but what's the risk? And every time that reward is like, Dr. Mason, Dr. Tony, right? I told you about my gummy bear little situation, just hold me up, but I want to eat these gummy bears, but I know they're not good for me. And every time that reward outweighs the risk. Like, I'm like, I would rather the reward, and it's worth that extra time. It's worth that I'm going to feel sluggish and crash in 2 hours and stuff like that. I eat the gummy bear. Well, teenagers or adolescents, their risk reward is still forming. And so and I know this wasn't about addiction medicine and stuff like that, but what happens with, you all mentioned exposure to substances that are addictive, right? It's because that risk, that dopamine surge, that dopamine surge, at that time, my brain, when I'm an adolescent, I love the reward more than I'm afraid of the risk. And so if I get that when I'm an adolescent, it literally trains your brain to go after the reward more often than you would. And a lot of times there's studies that show the brain gets stuck in that pattern. So now I'm 30, but I'm still stuck in that I want the reward pattern that I established due for DMX, that exposure to that addictive substance. They're still going after that dopamine. And so that's what's happening in that situation. I know this wasn't about addiction medicine, but it's really, if you get exposed when you're an adolescent, the reward center just grows and grows and grows. And that risk is like, I don't care about the risk anymore. Or I care less about the risk than I normally would had I not had that exposure during that time.
If I could just add one other little nugget to that, is that as we look today and we see more fragmentation of families, and back some years ago, there was always grandma, big mama, big papa people to play and to be those role models and they were just these natural relationships that existed. And with the fragmentation of families today, we see less of that. Therefore, that create a bigger void. And I think that we have to figure out some kind of way how to fill these voids, because these are the situations that create more opportunities for neglect and abuse to occur, because the young parents or even who need that support don't know where to find it, and they're just sort of sometimes searching, and then they get frustrated and they begin to respond to their frustration as opposed to looking at what is really needed for their child. So figuring out ways that we can fill in the gaps due to the fragmentation of families, especially in I know that's a fact in communities of color. So I'm sure it can be in any situation, but that fragmentation is really that brokenness is an example of why the top is broken, and so everything down from that get to be broken.
Dr. Miller, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm going to add something to this that we talked about just yesterday or the day before, and it had to do with the issue. On my show, I had Dr. Karen Taylor Crawford. Dr. Crawford. She is a child psychiatrist, and an internist that was on with her, and they were talking about how to prepare to be a parent, because no one gives us a class in that. And what happened is, as they call the ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves, what happens sometimes, we tend to retain more as we're growing up than we think. And oftentimes we will discipline, talk to, manage our children the way we were managed, even if that was mismanagement. And one of the things that would happen is that when we would discipline our children, sometimes we would whip them like our slave masters used to whip us unknowingly, and would call out and do things and it was an amazing conversation. But to get to the point of the whole situation is, though we were talking about becoming parents, just as people go into a marriage and go through premarital counseling, they go through in our church, they have to go through everything. They talk about everything, the money, the sex, everything before you go into this relationship. What do we do for people for pre-child counseling? What do we do to try to make certain that these two people who are going to come together, whether they do it in the context of this relationship or other relationships, understand what it means? Because, when the thrill is gone, it's all over with and we don't think about it anymore. But should we not be thinking about, particularly in the context with you, Becky and Marissa, should there be something that we do to try to think about how we better help people screen themselves for whether or not they're ready to have children? Because a lot of the children are not planned. They're not planned. I don't know how you don't plan when you have an unprotected sex with anybody, and everybody's reproductive age. Pregnancy is an anticipated and expected outcome, not a surprise.
I mean, you are hitting on a key lever here, is how can we partner with pediatricians, OBGYNs, churches to talk about parenting education. We actually have a lot of parenting education programs, which we've seen like a 79% reduction in harsh discipline. These moms, I sat in on them because I've taken them on congressional site visits, and they just said, like, I didn't know any better. My dad hit me with a belt. That's like the only way that they knew how to deal with their children. also, you know, some of these very, and I'm not going to say it's like some of our young teen moms too, like think, oh, my child is 3 years old and throwing food on the floor. They're being defiant. They aren't listening to me. And it's about saying, well, no, actually, they're 3 years old. They're not developmentally have the capacity to know that maybe they want to check out gravity. Maybe they think it's a game. But they're not being intentionally defiant. And so we also work with some moms who said, well, I had to grow up independent. I had no one to help and support me. So I'm just going to let my child cry on the floor because I want them to have independence. And the home visitor is able to say, if you want your child to have independence, you nurture them, you show them the way, you work with them, and then they'll have the independence that you want them to have. But, so I think it's reframing some of this, but these parenting education programs, sometimes we're waiting till parents are at a point of crisis and a breaking point before they're offering these services. So I'd like to see them, like I said, at a YMCA, at the church, because everyone can benefit. Again, like I didn't know a lot of these things until I was like calling my coworkers and being like, my child is crying his head off at 7 p.m. every night. Like, what's wrong with me as a parent? Well, no, that's the witching hour. All babies cry at that time. And so it's really, and you learn that from your pediatrician or if you have friends, but a lot of the moms and dads are socially isolated, or like Dr. James was saying, they don't have that family support. And so they don't know that this is normal. And then that adds to their stress and potential breaking point. So I agree. We need more parent education programs in a non-stigmatizing way. And just so everyone knows, like, yeah, how do we break that cycle?
I have a foster father that is getting ready to adopt one of my CASA children. And he has taken parenting classes because he did have an issue with a biological child. And he said that is the best thing he's ever done was to take that parenting class. We just need to figure out a way to get these parenting classes that are already developed and that work, because I've seen it firsthand that they work, but how do we get that to these young parents that really need them before a crisis situation? That is where that we really need to think about trying to get something like that done.
Well, I think one of the things we have to, we've talked on this program, we've been talking about a lot of things in terms of making people in the community healthy. And we look for situations and the timing of when things are appropriate and right. And, I know we can't do everything in school. However, school is a place of learning. And, we're going to have to really figure out where we are going to teach things that need to be taught. The time to teach a person how to adapt to certain things and to understand certain things is before they enter a situation. Once they're in the situation, then now the other stress makes it very difficult for them to learn. And so, maybe we got to figure out, can this be done in school, or can we create extra curriculum at the churches or at other settings where we can engage young people, because that's, once they're become a parent, the learning process is on the job, and that's a difficult task.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, thank you, Dr. Miller. I was going to say also, I think it is also important that we have conversations like we're having right now to establish norms, right? Talk about what it means. Becky, Marissa, you all are the experts, but they sit us down and they teach us like the 4 types of abuse and neglect: physical, sexual, emotional. Physical, sexual, emotional, or neglect. So also not doing this is a form of harming somebody. So not having these conversations also counts as harming each other and our children, right? And then and also making those things more understood as a community. We can break down the types of, we talked about physical, and someone mentioned how like that physical abuse, like I didn't know that was considered physical abuse because it happened to me. that also goes for sexual abuse, where you look at the statistics of people who are, I don't want to say likely, more likely to go on to commit sexual abuse, and how we, in, you know, just frankly, in different communities look at it as a context. You know, we can say it's in the African American community, but it's also in other communities where we know sometimes our youth can be sexually harmed, and we will overlook it for somebody's music or somebody's, you know, whatever we call it, and we won't hold the people who do harm to our children accountable. So it becomes a norm. And sometimes we even go in the case of, like you talked about your child, like why they throwing food on the floor, or why they, you know, sometimes, not all the time, there's a culture, not African American, I'm talking American, all American culture of blaming the victims of these things. And so, and then there is the part about neglect, where we just don't want to talk about it. We just don't want to be the ones. Well, I was wondering, because I know we have a little bit of time left, what happens, Becky, Marissa, what happens when I just don't want to be the one? Now, I'm a doctor. What does Illinois say about doctors, teachers, those type of people who, you know, I think is going on, but I just don't want to be the one? And then what happens if I'm not a mandated reporter and I see something and I want to know what's going on? Who are my, what do I do? You know, what do I do at that point on both ends?
Well, as far as, once again, with my work with CASA, my very first case was a neglect case. And even all the training I had, I'm telling you, it was terrible. And I would go to the school, and I faithfully every month went to the school. I would talk to the teachers. And you're exactly right, Dr. Maya. People don't like to talk about the neglect part. I mean, this little guy I had was so dirty, and he smelled so bad one day. And I went, and I'm sitting in the cafeteria with him, and all these mean little girls were making fun of him because of, and so I finally had to go get the janitor, and I said, you've got to make these kids stop. But, you know, but no one wanted to like do anything. And I would take my court report to the judge, and it was just like, this is as bad as being beaten. I mean, that child went through hell because he was so neglected. And I think education, for one thing. I mean, we've got to make it so that people are afraid to call the hotline. You know, they don't want to call the hotline. They're afraid to call it. And we're trying to, you know, educate people that call the hotline. That is their job. And, you know, and they need to be, you know, get their name in there, and so they can start the investigations. But my personal feeling is we have got to do a better job of educating everyone in our society, not just one section or the other. Everyone in our society needs to be better educated about what they can do to help these kids when they see it.
I agree with that, but I will harken back to how I kind of started this conversation, and there needs to be a paradigm shift. You're right that Dr. Maya, most child abuse and neglect is neglect. And that could be food insecurity, clothing, shelter, and, you know, our teachers are mandatory reporters, but we are talking about now who are mandatory supporters. So we know that communities of color are over surveilled. So what we know is that they're going to get the most calls for neglect than you may find in a white community, when maybe the family just needs access to food, clothing, support, and they shouldn't be triggered into a CPS situation. And so we need more education on, and actually I'm glad because Dr. James Miller brought this up, is there in Kentucky, for example, I think there's over 700 family resource centers that are embedded in the education system. So a teacher their first call is to their own kind of system to say, can we get Johnny clothes? Can we get, the parents need a little support on rent or electricity, instead of going into a CPS system. And so I think that we really have to be we have to think about this because teachers are mandatory reporters, but they also, I think out of 11% are substantiated for child abuse and neglect. And I know that pediatricians and teachers get frustrated sometimes because they make a call and they never hear, did anything happen? Like, was it resolved? And so we also need to do a better feedback loop of those that, you know, the cases were detected and what are they doing about it? Because then they feel disenfranchised. Why am I going to put my neck on the line and then never hear back? So there's so much to unpack there. But really important conversations. And the neglect thing, you know, let's look at like the child tax credit that just passed through the stimulus. I mean, that's giving families, you know, even this $80 more a month, that can do more for child abuse and neglect than some of these spattering of programs that we've talked about here. It's raising families out of poverty, lessening their stress, and just really help to holistically in a community-based way wrap around children and families.
You know, the other thing that we need to think about too is the role that society plays, particularly now with the access that children, unfettered access almost, that children have to all kinds of information on video, on their phones, on their tablets, and even regular programming, and with all of the things that I think their minds are not quite ready to process are creating some other issues. The other thing is that we can't leave society out. We created situations where we had, and we know that drugs, you know, there's some communities that have lots of these cheap, highly addictive drugs that are in their in the communities. Not that they don't make this stuff, so it gets there some sort of way. And what is the role that we have as a government to make certain that we do all that we can do to create safe neighborhoods for people, to create safe spaces? I mean, when I was at the health department, we did a lot of things about trying to create better parks, trying to do this, trying to do that. But when you got a woman who's got no food and somebody comes up and is willing to give them food, and I'm hearing all kinds of things that are going on that people are doing, and I'm not trying to put it all on women, but when we had mass incarceration, we took a lot of men out of the picture for various and sundry things. So it's a huge problem, not that it's insurmountable, but certainly one that requires a comprehensive approach. Not to mention what these kids are eating.
Well, what is cereal, Dr. Mason?
It's a made up thing. It is a food substance. It is a food-like substance, unless it is from a whole grain or something like that. But all of these sugary, and don't get me started on this, I didn't want to go there, but all these sugary, frosted, most of our things are overly sugared. They're over processed, and that's what our children are eating, and that stuff is not good for them. It's not feeding anything in a nutritious way that helps their cells to grow in a normal way. These food products, you know, I don't call them food. Cereals are made up things. They're not real. I mean, when I grew up, I ate malto meal. I ate grits. I ate oatmeal. These kids don't get a lot of that sort of stuff. And in the school lunch program, particularly if you start looking at the school programs in the inner cities, and you begin to see exactly what our children are being exposed to, even many times after not even having a place to sleep or somewhere to, or an opportunity to sleep someplace safe. Even with our college students having a large homelessness population, and many of them riding the trains all night because they have nowhere to go, and families going from car to car, trying to provide. There's a plethora of issues, but the only thing I'm trying to say is I don't want to put or blame the victims for all of these problems. There are societal structures that are put in place that adversely affect certain populations and create these things on purpose.
Mm-hmm. I'll only comment just briefly that Dr. Mason is spot on. The dietary guidelines are not serving you. The USDA is serving the industries and the farmers, and they're trying to grow this. They use what they put in the cereals, all this wheat and corn and soy and all this garbage, so they can then justify subsidizing the farmers. But so if you look at the food pyramids at the bottom, you see all these foods that are just garbage. Why? And like that, it's like Frankenfood. So again, that's the problem, but we don't want to get off subject. I do want to quickly comment about when I delivered babies at West Suburban Hospital. There were all these beautiful young women coming in there, and they were really primed to learn, because even a young 12, 13, 14-year-old cares about her baby. And that's a great time to get them, right? So imagine if our congressman was able to secure funding so that when they're going through prenatal, and maybe it's a hook. Maybe it's not a requirement, but it's saying if you do A, B, and C, there will be some bonuses. That's what we do with an Advocate Aurora. You don't have to do anything, but you can win a trip somewhere if you do these healthy living programs, right? So a lot of people end up doing it anyway, and then you can teach prenatal things about how to raise a child. My mom had a fit when I stopped doing physical discipline. She said, "You're gonna have crazy kids." Well, guess what? They didn't turn out too crazy. They're doing pretty good. they went to great schools. They're being successful. So my point is, I had to learn how to not use physical discipline. We did timeout and things like that, and my kids turned out okay. It's part of our culture, but we have to be taught a different culture. Imagine if we not only teach them through prenatal, but we keep giving them nuggets of support. And for the next 5 years, they have coaching, somebody can talk to once a month. So, because you're not going to get it in that one moment. You have to kind of keep, maybe they have groups that they can. So there's a lot of opportunity here. We just have to take this moment and get those kids what they need so that they can do the things they need for their babies.
And I would say you're right on. And Congressman Davis was the first champion in 2004 of the Education Begins at Home Act, and that is evidence-based home visiting. And we work with, we get a lot of our clients going in the hospital or prenatally, because that's when they have the time to work with us, build the trust and understand. And so one thing you brought up, that if this could be universal, so all mom can be offered, and some people only need a light touch. Maybe they need 1 or 3 visits, and then they can be, to the more intensive, which is what we do, 3 to 5 year programming. But right now, and Congressman Davis, did a bill to double funding right now, but we're only serving 3% of the 18 million women and children who could benefit from home visiting. But Duke, for example, in North Carolina, they did at one of their hospitals, did this universal approach where every baby born, a mom was offered home visiting services, and the outcomes are fabulous and great. But for whatever reason, we're not investing in that front end. We want to wait till families are at the point of crisis and it's too late. So, maybe through this administration and Congressman Davis's bills, we can get more traction to do more of this work, because we know the research and the outcomes is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, can we provide incentives? I mean, I was intrigued with the idea of incentivizing individuals as opposed to trying to require. I mean, there have been programs and programs that individuals, like we've been trying to do real fatherhood for a number of years, and we do some fatherhood, and we have some fatherhood initiatives, and there are men who will come and participate. Of course, not nearly the numbers that you'd like to get or the numbers you'd like to have, but it intrigues me to think that maybe incentivizing And maybe if we could call things abuse, like I think I see abuse every morning when I stop to get a newspaper and I see these people buying hottie hots and, you know, all of those things that they give to their children. Or if there was some way to mandate that children get a healthy breakfast, I guess whatever the school lunch or the school breakfast program is, I don't know exactly what it is because of the virus and not being there. But I guess if we could convince the planners to make sure that the time is spent to make sure to the best of their ability that these kids do get nutritious meals that are provided at school. And that's something that I'm going to try and take a little look at and see what they're doing. Because I can't say that I actually know.
As it relates to just the ideal of educating the moms so that they can make better decisions, hopefully, what we deem as better decisions. We want to be careful because when you think about, mandating, that's like, it's almost like a stigma that comes with that. There's some perception of prejudice or discrimination that comes with that. So we can bypass all of that by not mandating, but again, making it something that people would, here's a great benefit if you choose to take this path. My experience has been that people will take that hook. So we have to be careful because other folk will use it in a negative way. And so we can bypass all of that and say, hey, this is here as an opportunity if you choose it. And then when they take advantage of the opportunity, then they will grow. And trust me, they will come. So we just have to make it attractive enough. But those are the types of things we have to think outside the box. And we don't necessarily, if we can just go from that small percentage that was suggested earlier, that number from single digits up to 20%, 30%, then we'll have a victory. Imagine the millions of people that will be impacted.
Hey,
Congressman, to your point, the Good Food Purchasing Program is a program that was started. Actually, the Los Angeles Unified School District did a lot of work in this area, and that ordinance was passed by the Cook County Commissioners and the Chicago the City of Chicago Board of Education began to put these together. To your point about how we could do better foods. For example, the City of Chicago, at least before I left, had eliminated all chicken that had hormones. And there are a number of things that we can do to increase the food, but at the same time, help subsidize our growers, our suppliers that are trying to do a better job with the supplies of foods that we have. So I just didn't want to leave without talking about the Good Food Purchasing Program, which has some very interesting targets in it. And both the City of Chicago and the County of Cook have adopted this program. And what we do is look at our spend for food in every single department, whether it's the jail, the schools, whatever it is. Are we buying the best possible food for the best possible price? And are we giving minority vendors an opportunity to participate in this spend? For the county, it's about $15 million. For the city, it's even more. So there are some, I just want the congressman to know that has happened. I don't know its status right now, but there are some things in the right direction.
Well, I tell you, I'd love to have some grits every morning about the way my mother used to I'd get up 30, 40 minutes early. If somebody had them there. I mean, I don't know if anybody can duplicate that. They
Not
say
even.
all taste the same to me.
Yeah, it takes. This is about really making investment in people, and that's what everybody is talking about. We got to figure out ways to help people to be better people and be better friends, better neighbors, better families, and that's going to take it's going to take some investment and a lot of time investment and patience, and to bring about get the best out of people, as opposed to putting people in situations and conditions that seem to create a lot of stress and animosity, and therefore, instead of the good coming out, their frustration comes out, and that tend to be ugly.
Dr. Pete, you were about to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it would be great to see if we could get some corporate bagging of purchasing certain items that young moms and young families are going to need, and then incentivize those, like Dr. Hampton was saying, incentivize those young parents to say, hey, if you participate in this particular short class, you're going to get a car seat and a whatever baby, whatever. And if you bring the dad with you, you're going to get this much more. And you can call it what you want to call it. You want to call it bribery or whatever you want to call it. But if at the end of the day, I have a more informed parent that will not willingly or unwillingly pass on generational curses to their next generation, then so be it. We did it, and what did it cost? Okay, it cost Amazon what 0.000% of their budget. So, hey, donate some stuff and let us, see if we could, try to eliminate or at least reduce the amount of abuse that happens and neglect that happens in our communities.
All right.
I didn't mean to call Amazon out. Sorry. I love Amazon. Jeff Bezos, don't come get me.
Congressman Evelyn over at Evelyn's Food Love says she's got grits. Grits just for you. However you want them. Old-fashioned grits, down-home grits, grits with shrimp, grits with cheese. She says she has them just for you. I'm going to say something that you guys never want to hear me sing on a Monday night, and that is, it's our time. We actually went over a little bit, but it's okay. Just want to say a couple special shout outs to some people who was here with me on tonight. We're here with us on tonight. Martha says, good evening, everyone. Linda Johnson says, good evening, everyone. Sean Kennedy, who's here. Curtis Jones. To the Reeves, who says, hey, P. Linda Johnson says, show true, Congressman. Karen is here saying hello to everyone. To Harriet Humphreys, Dolores Wiles, Audrey Jaycock. To Kathleen Johnson, to Wilbur Cook, that's Reverend Wilbur Cook, who is here with us just as well. To Mary Ballinger, to Bonnie Schmedley, who is here. And I see all of your comments and all of your questions. My good friend and sister, Melanie Winston, Melly Mel says, love this dialogue. We do have premarital classes at Living Word, but you're right in saying pre-parenting classes are much needed in the church and other community-based organizations. Of course, Sean Kennedy says we are going to need a part 2 and 3 to this discussion. I'm just saying. Some answers and questions. We tried to answer some of your questions on tonight. And we also put some things in the chat box for you. Of course, Apostle Carolyn Vessel says, so appreciated your truth, Dr. Mason. Just added sugar are also critical, adding insult to injury. Evelyn Shelton is once again here. She's saying thank you so much. And remember, she's got those grits. So, want to remind you guys, the numbers in the city of Chicago for COVID is going up, as we all know. We reached that 5.7 mark, and we've got to work on that. And actually, our state of Illinois had a week to remember. We had over 2,400 positives that showed up just in the last 7 days alone, which has taken us over the highest number that we had in January. So we have to remember to do those 3 things that we always talk about. We got to remember to stand up and mask up. And also get the vaccine. The congressman is sponsoring an additional mass vaccine along with our collaboration, our consortium of our African American physicians and healthcare professionals. We're doing this Sunday. That's Sunday on a Sunday morning, Sunday, April 18th at 5335. And we'll send all this information out and post it on social media for you, just as well as Express Tennis, located at 5335 on State Street. So we're going to be on the south side on this Sunday sharing those vaccines. Remember, we're going to have Johnson & Johnson this Sunday. That's one and done. So for all of you who are afraid to have that second shot, just come get the one. It's one and done. And remember, as always, to do three favorite things. You got to wash those hands. You got to wear your mask, as you can see everybody has on here, properly over your nose and mouth. And you got to remember to social distance. If you stretch those arms out and somebody's touching you and you're touching them, we are so close to our breakthrough. Just remind them to scoot over just a little bit so we can get past. Quickly, we're going to go around and ask everybody, what is your thoughts until next Monday? Dr. Terry Mason, until next Monday.
Till next Monday. Don't forget to be here next Monday.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Dr. James Miller, until next Monday.
You're muted, James. You're muted.
Until next Monday, let us show love to one another by being kinder to each other.
All right. Dr. Douglas Graham, until next Monday.
I'd say get your vaccination and encourage your neighbor to get vaccinated too.
All right, all right. Becky, your until next Monday.
I have to agree. Please be kind to everyone. Keep your eyes open. And if you think that you need to make a report or to talk to someone about a child that you think needs help, please do it.
Great. Maritza, until next Monday.
Prevention happens in partnership. So thank you all for the great conversation.
Thank you so much. Dr. Maya, until next Monday.
I love the thought about, they noted about mandated reporters, and they talked about if you're a mandated reporter, remember before you're that, you're a mandated supporter. So I'm going to really enjoy looking at all the ways I can walk about being a mandated supporter. Thank you so much.
Awesome, awesome. Dr. Tony Hampton, you're until next Monday.
I think we all have an obligation to identify those people in our lives that we perceive as, negative, right? And I want you to start seeing the world through their lens. And I'll be honest, when I spoke of DMX, I didn't know the full breadth of who he was until I saw, like my brother Pete was saying, an interview. Until I listened to that video, I Miss You, and he talked about his grandmother. So now I see him through a different lens. So look around your own family. That one cousin that's always acting up, won't you talk to him, see where he's at, and find a way to support him? And there are resources out here to help him or her find a better path. So that'll be mine until next time.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Dr. P, as you begin to tell your next Monday, I'm going to share with you that Amazon has your couch conversations mask. I just thought I'd share that with you. Go right ahead, Dr. P.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, you never know who's watching, and this was pre-pandemic, but I had a young guy who had just got married, and he came up to me, he saw me, and he said, I sit behind you in church. He said, I watch you come in with your family. And, I didn't know somebody was watching me. And here this young guy was. He said, I wasn't married at the time. He said, but I have my own family now. And he said, you were the first person that I saw, you were watching your kids get into the little pew or whatever. And so you never know who's watching you. And so to be aware and so, just be an example for somebody.
Wonderful, wonderful. To the vanguard on healthcare, the man who drives the train, until next Monday, take us home, Congressman.
Well, I really wanted to say to the family of Sinclair Booker, if any of them are on one of the longtime volunteers at PUSH, who's been a stalwart volunteer there ever since I've known PUSH to have existed. He passed away, and if any of his family members own, just know that we will miss him. Another young fellow who came to me some years ago and said, my stepfather told me that if I ever needed help to kind of look you up, and this person, Rodney Williams, passed away last week. To his family also. And this question of family, I have a nephew who passed away down in Atlanta. And of course, I won't be able to be there with my nieces and nephews as they memorialize his life. But it just kind of reinforces the importance of family and the things that families do and need to stay connected. So let me just thank all of our participants. Marissa, Becky, we thank you both. And of course, all the docs, we always look forward to this Monday exchange and Monday interaction. And I guess we're so fortunate to simply be alive and to be in a position to discuss these tremendous issues and try and figure out ways to enhance the quality of life for those who need all of the attention that we can give, but also for ourselves. Because when we improve the lives of others, we're actually improving our own lives. And so we're actually working for ourselves any way you cut it. And Evelyn, I'm going to be looking for those grits. And the first opportunity that I get, I'll be there. So everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you all so much. I'm heading off to DC tomorrow to see what we can get done there. But thank you all for what it is that you do here, and have a great evening.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you.